This video is sponsored by Premium Sound, one of the UK's premier dealers located in Kensington, London, with an online store carrying a comprehensive inventory to cater for a variety of needs. For more details, click the link in the description. It's that time of year again where I've been reflecting on the products that I reviewed in 2023. This year I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to divide them into categories: below £1,000, £1,000 to £3,000 and above £3,000. Those delineations I haven't chosen arbitrarily. It's where I see people taking the next steps with their systems as they naturally evolve, assuming that they have the funds to do so. You may have a pair of speakers at £500 which you replace for ones at £1,500, and those again for ones at £4,500. Spending about 3 times what you did previously is a general good rule of thumb to guarantee a worthwhile improvement. But enough about that. There's been some great speakers that I've reviewed this year. I'm always really impressed when I come across gear that sounds fabulous for the kind of money that's accessible to most people in this hobby. There's one thing that's changed radically, well, maybe not radically, but significantly in my 3.5 decades of being an audiophile. It's that the gear below £1,000 has got an awful lot better. This year is no exception. There have been 3 sets of speakers that in any other given year could have easily won this category. That makes it not only one of the most hotly contested categories of this year, it makes it one of the most hotly contested categories since I started reviewing on this channel. The Acoustic Energy AE109 Mark IIs are the big brother of one of my favourite speakers, the AE100 Mark II stand mounts that I reviewed in 2022. The slim, elegant floor standers are available for £599 in the UK, measuring less than a metre high and only 165mm wide. That's 6.5 inches in old money. The cabinet is constructed from HDF as opposed to MDF, that's why they can get away with being so svelte. The 2.5 way design features 2 130mm 5.25 inch paper cone woofers and one 25mm 1-inch soft dome tweeter sitting in a shallow waveguide. Hands up, I have to say that I've struggled with floor standing speakers below £1,000 in the past. I get why people would choose them over stand mounts where they're chasing higher SPL levels, either because they've got home cinema systems or larger rooms. But a lot of floor standing speakers that I've encountered below £1,000 tend to be nothing much more than boom boxes due to poor quality drivers and cabinets that ring like a bell. Not the AE109s. They have great clarity and don't smear timing cues, which allows them to soundstage an image without hindrance. Naturally, they produce more bass than smaller stand mount speakers, but it's well defined, and there's plenty of body to the mid-range which imparts a warmer tonal balance. They're comfortably the best floor standing speakers that I've heard for £600 and compete with the best stand mount speakers for the same money. That brings me to the Q Acoustic 5020s that are exactly the same price at £599, the vinyl wrap being the only obvious giveaway of budget constraints. The drivers have been developed from scratch. The 125mm 5-inch mid-woofer is a result of extensive research and development, being the first Q Acoustics driver to ditch a central dust cap for a conical cone. The 25mm 1-inch tweeter is hermetically sealed, i.e. airtight to not be affected by cabinet pressure changes. It's also mechanically isolated from the front baffle to further reduce distortion. Surprisingly, the Q Acoustic 5020s give up very little in terms of bass weight to the AE109s. They don't have the same bass extension as the compact floor standers, but have a very satisfying mid-bass punch. What am I doing? Anyway, the mid-range is very well fleshed out and the top end well extended to give a very balanced tonal presentation. They offer up a little bit more detail than the Acoustic Energy speakers and are arguably less coloured, but the AE109s are more dynamic and have more body and warmth in the mid-range, which will appeal to many. For an extra £100, the Monitor Audio Silver 57Gs are dressed in a real wood veneer cabinet. There are a number of finish options, but ash veneer is my favourite, conceding nothing aesthetically to many speakers retailing for £2,000. The 134mm 5.25 inch midwoofer has a coated metal alloy cone made from a proprietary material termed CCAM. The ceramic coated aluminium magnesium compound was originally employed in the aircraft industry. The 25mm 1-inch tweeter is also a C-cam driver, finished in gold and protected by a grille, evolved from the previous 6th generation model to offer better stability over 10,000 Hz and lower distortion, according to Monitor Audio. The MA Silver 57Gs not only look the part, they sound the part as well. They're the most resolving speakers I've heard below £1,000, maybe not a whole step above the Q Acoustic 5020s, but certainly half a step. They're a touch on the analytical side, but nothing excessive and certainly not bright, and this is a trait that they share with my reference speakers below £1,500. It's surprising how close the Silver 50s get to the Amphion Argon ones, which cost over double if you go like for like with a real wood veneer finish. It's the size of the Silver 50s that places certain restrictions. They have limited bass extension and they sound more compressed than the Argon ones, but they are smaller speakers. They're also smaller than the Q Acoustic 5020s. In fact, they're not much bigger than mini monitors, which makes them ideal to place at the end of a desk or in a small room. And if you want more bass extension, you can always add a subwoofer. It's their ability to scale up to deliver more performance as you improve the electronics around them that sets them apart. They're not out of place with the best amplifiers I've heard around £2,000, and they're certainly the best speakers I've heard for the money. And that's why the Monitor Audio Silver 50 7th generation are my best speakers of 2023, below £1,000. This year I came across a couple of speakers in this category that were a little bit unusual for one reason or the other, but absolute gems. Take one look at the Ayal speakers from 3 Square Audio and you're either likely to be intrigued or offended. You can guess which camp I fall into. Darth Vader is what one viewer cleverly nicknamed them. Let's get one thing straight. Darth Vader is the coolest Star Wars character ever. Surely we can all agree on that. Anyway, there's a reason why they have that step front baffle. It's to time align the drivers, and it means that they can get away with using first order crossovers. It isn't possible to get true time alignment using higher order crossovers. More parts in the crossover leads to time smearing. That's why the few parts that are in the crossover of the Ayals are of top quality, with capacitors and air core inductors from Janssen. The drivers are also premium quality from Sias's Prestige range, a 120mm 4.7-inch coated paper cone mid-woofer and a 27mm 1.1-inch Sonolex fabric dome tweeter. With cabinets constructed from a wood fibre resin called Velcro mat, it can be dyed in different colours and is superbly inert, passing my knuckle wrap test. The attention to detail and the premium quality parts show up in the performance. Okay, so you're not going to get great bass extension and dynamics out of a 4.7-inch mid-woofer, and I'd say for anything other than near-field listening, adding a subwoofer is pretty much essential. I'd also like a little bit more energy from the tweeter, even though the Ayals I wouldn't describe as being dark or rolled off. It's the detail and the natural tonality that puts them top of the class, or certainly very much towards the top of the class for speakers I've heard that retail for around £2,000. They retail for just a whisker under £2,000. But it's the imaging and sound staging, and in particular the sound staging depth, which is breathtaking. You just need to make sure you partner it with equipment that can show off those qualities. They were absolutely singing with my Hagel H190. I reviewed another pair of speakers just under £2,000 that were again a departure from the norm. PMC's new Prodigy 5s may not look unusual at first glance, being compact floor standers, just 905mm or 35.6 inches high. You have to scratch beneath the surface. These are not ordinary ported speakers, but a transmission line design. That's what PMC is known for. Transmission line speakers are more complex to design and build than ported and seal box speakers. That's why you don't typically tend to find them at the lower price points. It's unusual to find a pair of commercially available floor-standing transmission line speakers retailing for less than £2,000. Given PMC's track record and expertise in this area, I was amazed to find them entering this market segment. They got there by making lots of smart design choices. I cover this in more detail in my full review, but there's a lot of trickle-down technology from their more expensive ranges. For instance, the drivers are taken from existing PMC speakers. The 27mm 1.1-inch soft dome tweeter, hidden behind a mesh grille, is taken from their professional range, and the 133mm 5.25-inch mid-woofer with a natural fibre cone is uplifted from one of their custom install range of speakers. Transmission line speakers done right produce a deep and clean bass that I haven't heard from other topologies, but that isn't the only aspect of the Prodigy 5s that impresses. Normally I can point to a particular trait and say there's a fault or at least a limitation. I'm not saying the Prodigy 5s are perfect and that you can't get more performance if you spend more money, but you won't find sonically a more complete pair of speakers below £2,000 than the Prodigy 5s. They're detailed, dynamic, refined, neutral but more importantly natural in tone. They soundstage and image superbly well too, and that's why the PMC Prodigy 5s are my best speakers of 2023, between £1,000 and £3,000. Okay, so there's something that I need to clarify before moving on. My experience of hi-fi products as you move up to the higher price points is that the sound diverges rather than converges. What I mean is you're more likely to find two speakers at £1,000 that share sonic characteristics than two speakers at £5,000. And that's because manufacturers tend to pursue specific design philosophies to make gains in performance in certain areas. It's highly unusual to find a pair of speakers, or electronic components for that matter, that make gains in all areas of performance. And that ultimately does get reflected in my individual reviews and the ratings I give them. But it doesn't mean that there aren't some great products out there. The DALI Epicon 2s are such an example. They're the most resolving speakers I've heard to date. DALI's flagship stand mount speakers currently retail for £5,199 and come in some stunning high gloss wood veneer finishes. Mine came in satin white, which is not my thing, but hey ho, at least they were easy to photograph. The sculptured cabinet, achieved by bonding 6 layers of MDF, is designed to reduce internal standing waves. The midwoofer is immediately identifiable as a DALI driver thanks to its burgundy wood fibre infused paper cone, in this application with a diameter of 165mm or 6.5 inches. The soft dome tweeter is larger than normal at 29mm 1.2 inches, but it's about 30% lighter than a typical 1-inch soft dome and can extend out to 30,000 Hz. There's lots of innovative stuff going on with these speakers that I discuss in my main review, such as the soft magnetic compound that's used in the motor structure, which is supposed to have better mechanical and electrical properties over a ferromagnet. These are very detailed sounding speakers with an organic mid-range and an ability to disappear, which is fantastic. But they aren't the most dynamic speakers that I've come across, especially at lower volumes. I wish that they just had a little bit more bass welly. For low frequency reproduction, I haven't encountered anything to match the Pearl Acoustic Sibelius speakers, retailing directly out of Belgium for €4,950 plus shipping for the version with a solid oak cabinet. The painted finishes will cost you an extra €1,000 due to increased labour costs, which I see as a bit of an issue and something that the Pearl team need to look at. The enclosure is related to a transmission line speaker. The tapered quarter wave tube is also known as a VoIP pipe, named after the founder who first brought the speakers to market in the 1930s. It's married to a Mark Audio single full-range driver with a 100mm 4-inch metal alloy cone. There's no crossover. The drivers couple directly to the amplifier, like with active speakers. The bass is magical. It's something that's hard to get right with music reproduction, but the Sibelius speakers get it right. It's deep, detailed and textured in a way that I haven't heard in my room before or since. And the mid-range is no slouch either. It has superb clarity thanks to that Mark Audio driver and with no impairment from a crossover, and with none of the hardness or brightness that you sometimes associate with metal cone drivers. It's in the upper 2 octaves where it can't compete with the best tweeters, and that's just down to a limitation of the design. The Castle Windsor Earls are unusually well-rounded speakers for the £3,850 asking price. The new Castles follow in the fine cabinetry traditions of their predecessors, with architectural grade veneers obtained from sustainable sources. The 165mm 6.5 inch midwoofer has been specifically developed for the Earls with a woven polypropylene cone, producing a flatter frequency response than a form PP cone according to the design literature. The polyester dome tweeter is 28mm 1.1 inches in diameter, based on the one found in parent company IAG's Mission 770, but tweaked to suit purposes here. The Earls are decent sized stand mount speakers that offer plenty of bass weight and very good bass definition. It's a fine balancing act between virtues that's maintained across all aspects of their performance. Tonally they sit on the warm side, even though I don't think they go as far as something like Harbuth's. There's very good detail, even if they don't extract quite as much information from recordings as my Proax. Well, there's slightly less micro detail, but they are bigger speakers and they sound quite a bit bigger. There's a lot more bass, which is very well controlled, and the mid-range is slightly less compressed with better instrument separation. The tweeter is also very capable, extended and refined, preserving spatial cues and timing information. And that's my point with the Earls. There isn't a particular trait that you can point to and say, wow, it's their overall blend of abilities that makes them the most accomplished speakers I've heard this year for the money. And that's why the Castle Windsor Earls are my best speakers of 2023, above £3,000. I've really enjoyed reflecting back on this year. There's so many interesting speakers that have passed my way, and I plan to do a similar video on amplifiers and source components, so look out for those videos. My question for today is, what are your favourite speakers of 2023? Please share that in the comments section. And I'd just like to thank everybody who supports this channel by watching my videos, commenting, and of course those people who support me on Patreon. If you fancy checking out my Patreon, there's a couple of consultancy tiers there that you can access, as well as the ABA Club, which has some great ways to interact with me and fellow Patreons. But for today, for now, a British audiophile, signing off.